Hi, this is Eddy Grant on To Be Caribbean, elevating Caribbean culture.
Greetings, welcome to Ambassador 5, a series where we showcase a Caribbean cultural ambassador who's actively promoting our culture throughout the world. My name is Marissa, and today we have the pleasure of speaking to Guyanese born, London bred, Bajan living, musical icon who is very well known throughout the world for both his music and for his business moves behind the scenes. Please help us to welcome Dr. Eddy Grant. So Dr. Grant, do I call you Dr. Grant?
You call me anything you want. I've been called worse names.
I think I'll roll with Eddy. I like Eddy.
Good.
Okay. So Eddy, you left Plaisance, Guyana and moved to North London when you were 12 years old. Tell us a little bit about how that journey shaped you both as a man and as a musician. Some memorable moments throughout that.
Yes, I'm always being asked about memorable moments for things that are hundreds of years long. But I'll try. When I went to England at the age of 12, I had sufficiently grown. I was like a little man. And I had to go back now to being a little boy.
Right.
Because 12-year-olds in England were little boys. And I had already learned how to mix mortar, how to saw wood, how to make mortise and tenons to put up houses. I'd learned a lot of things.
Right.
And I had to kind of unlearn those. The only thing that I didn't have to unlearn really was woodwork, because that helped me eventually to make my guitar to then become who I am.
Right.
In England was so different. It was a culture shock. In Guyana, we're used to having our little independent houses where it doesn't matter how small, all of us were going to fit. And we had land because there wasn't much demarcating of lands. There were some people who thought they're this or they are that, and so therefore they put a thing around their house which costs more than the house. But outside of that, we had access to the Grand Savannah. You know, we were able to run and swim in the trenches and swim in the canals and go and break cane and climb trees and all the things that were nigh on impossible. Well, they were impossible in London.
Right.
And so London became almost a constricted environment where, especially when it's cold, you are assigned to your house or your flat or your room.
Right.
In our case, it was our room. And I had my 4 brothers with me, and we were each our own company. And so then you start to create in your mind, you create what it is that you want to be, if you're allowed.
Okay. And that's what spawned your creative side?
Well, what spawned my creative? I was always creative because obviously when you don't have many things to play with, you have to create that which you are going to play with. And in our case, it could be 2 sticks and a circle in the thing with some buttons or some marbles that came from eating the coconut or the awara or the kuru fruit. And so you made buck tops with the kuru and the stick and so on. You learned how to do things to make yourself happy. And in England, after a while, music became the thing that made me most happy. And so obviously then I would create with it.
Right.
You know, and especially when people started saying they like it, you know, I thought to myself, okay. And in time, it grew because my influence grew and so on and so forth. But that is like the truncated.
Right, very
thing.
truncated.
Yeah, very truncated.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. You were talking about, you know, your circle of influence growing, right?
Yes.
And I think that's really interesting. Like, one thing that I learned about you is that you were part of one of the first racially integrated music bands, the Equals. And just curious as to that climate at the time, Windrush generation, trying to bridge the gap between cultures, Caribbean and London. Like, how did your music play an important role in that?
Well, I like to say that the Equals were the first boy band, multiracial boy band in England and perhaps even the world.
Okay.
Because there was Booker T and the MGs before the Equals, but outside of that, and that was Booker T and the MGs. The Equals was just the Equals, corporately and otherwise we were one. There was no leader, so to speak, no identified and the, you know what I'm saying?
Right, yeah.
So in actual strict terminology, the Equals were the first boy band that was mixed race in the world.
Yes.
And of that I'm immensely proud, because the Equals, unlike the rest of the world, never had an argument based on race. I mean, but never. It was never even mentioned. But we knew, obviously, outside of the ambit of the room that we were in, there was a raging war going on outside.
Right.
But within us, there was not that racial tug of war.
Right. So did you all have an intentional mission of showing what cultural integration could look like through your music, or did that just happen by chance?
As you grow, you realize then what it is in fact that's happening to you, because life is something that happens to you. We wanted to play and obviously wanted to succeed as we'd seen others play and succeed. The consideration of whether we were doing something socially remarkable never really appeared until much later, when, of course, people then started giving you the feedback, which is cultural feedback, on what part you're playing in this whole experience. So we just continued to play the music and let everybody do what they feel to it. The fact that we were from different parts probably helped us to interpret things in a special way, because it was now an amalgam of races, an amalgam of culture, an amalgam of things, behavior, and so on. And eventually, obviously, as the person who was making the music and the person who was writing the songs, that came onto my shoulder more and more. It's not something that I wanted. I never wanted to be the leader of the Equals. I never wanted. Matter of fact, we had made a pact that they would be a democratic thing about the band and so on. It shows you that democracy really doesn't work. I've always, since I've become sensible to things political, I've always thought of a beneficial dictator is better than democracy. And it's been proven time and time again, even in the corporate world. Someone has to be the arbiter, the final arbiter, in order for things to go forward. And more and more that those things fell onto myself. One, because I had more time than the others because they were at work. I was still at school. So I could take time and run down to the West End of London and speak to the record company people and speak to the people who were making instruments and speak to generally all the agents and so on. And so I became the conduit between the band and the rest of the world.
Right.
And I didn't see that as anything until eventually in time, when everybody's coming asking for interviews and stuff like that. The other guys were not really interested in those things. They were busy chasing girls. I was not into chasing girls. I had a view in front of me that I think now, in retrospect, pulled the band along because I had more time to think about things and to focus on things and then bring that to the band.
Right. Okay. So let's explore that. So you mentioned becoming the unintentional leader of your band, let's say.
Yes.
And I think my perspective is by default you also became an unintentional Caribbean cultural ambassador because you were the voice of Caribbean music, I guess, within your team. I'm making assumptions.
Very much so, probably, because I mean everybody's got music that they like.
Right.
But I was passionate about music that I liked. I was passionate, first of all, copying Sparrow from Guyana.
Right.
I knew how to sing calypso, I knew how to rhyme, and Sparrow was the one that was being played most in our region. So Sparrow was my initial teacher at about the age of 5 probably. And so then the other guys would have had their heroes. Maybe one would have liked Fats Domino, or the other would have liked the Beatles or somebody else, who knows. But more and more, because I had a greater knowledge of music in a formal sense, having played classical music with my trumpets and been in school's orchestra and stuff, I understood, and the fact that my father was such a great musician, I understood music, not any particular genre. I understood music, and music resounded within me. So it became very easy to arrive at the position where I was doing everything musical, and nobody could tell me what to like. And so that developed in me a kind of passionate dictatorship, if you like, that enabled me to keep the equals from being like everybody else, which is what we've been speaking about earlier on. It gave me, if not an ego, it gave me a passion for that which I know I can do. And so if I know calypso, which I did, and if I know ska music, which I did, because I very soon got into listening to that every Friday and Saturday night, and it became a part of me. So I've got this, and then I get Chuck Berry comes into my life, and then I get James Brown comes into my life, and then I get E.T. Mensah from Ghana come into my life, and I'm hearing all of these things, and at the same time I know about Tchaikovsky, I know about Liszt, I know about Beethoven, I know about all these other guys who are also making music of a kind. And so I ingested all of this, and I put it in my music, I put in what I like. If I like a string sound, I put it in a calypso. I like, you know, which is why all the arguments that has emanated out of Trinidad with the issue of soca and who was the first person that conceptualized this thing and so on. But it's not a big thing with me. What is the big thing with me is that I have done it. And who knows, knows. And so now with RingBang over the last God knows how many years, I finally found the essence of our music. The essence of our music is the drum. And everything, every instrument that is ever played has to be played like a drum. Other than that, it's not right. And I don't, listen, a person can now write into you and say, hey, Eddy Grant's talking a bunch of crap because you don't play a violin like a drum. Sorry, you're wrong. You know, every instrument is a drum. And so with that, I create. I can create any music of any kind. I mean, I've never played Chinese music, but believe me, I've sat and listened to it.
Yeah.
Believe me, I can.
I saw you on that pan earlier.
Yes, they're all one thing.
Right.
You just, it's a question of, does that note please you? Or if you sharpen it, it will please you. Right. You know, does that note please you? If you flatten it, it will please you. Music is that simple.
Right. Okay. So clearly you're very passionate about music and you know it very well. But there's another dimension to you in terms of the business aspect of music. And we know that you've purchased the rights to some artists' songs, and then you've been championing the RingBang movement, making it into a brand. Tell us a little bit about the business side of music. What inspires you to be so involved in that part of it?
Well, again, everything starts with a person, a man or a woman who is your mentor. I've had a number of really great mentors, but there was a guy called Milton Samuels, young, he was older than I by some years, but young chap. And he was black, and he got the first #1 hit record with a black owned and operated record company in England. Okay. The song was called Ain't Nothing But a House Party, and it was by the Showstoppers. And I got to know Milton through a set of circumstances that are not very clear at this time. But if I went back in my memory, I remember exactly where we met.
Right.
Okay, so I met Milton after I was starting to become successful as a writer and as a musician. And one day he asked me a simple question. He says, "How are you doing?" And I says, "Oh, I'm doing all right." And he said, "I looked out the window just now and I saw you've got, what is it? Austin 1100. He says, "You know what I drive?" I said, "I got no idea." He says, "I drive an MGB sports car." I said, good, that's nice. Okay. So he says, "I think you should learn something about the business that you're in. Don't you?" And I says, "Yeah, sure. But how?" He says, "I'll tell you some things, and then you come back and you negotiate with me. All right?" Good. And he told me some things, some of the rules, and I would go every afternoon or so, 4 or 5 o'clock, when things have slowed down a bit at his office, and we would talk about those things and we would negotiate. And after a while he said, "Whoa, hold on, you're making up the rules, you're inventing new rules." I says, "But isn't that what the music business is about?" He says, "Yes." He says, "Now I want you to go and tell your boss that you want back everything that you've ever done." I says, "Hey?" He said, "Well, just go and you'll see how good a negotiator you are." Yeah, and I went and I said to the old man, the guy who, Mr. Kasner, who owned the record label, he owned our management company, he owned our publishing company. And I said, "You know, Mr. Kasner, I think, I should get back all the music that I've made for you and stuff like that. I wouldn't in your program. I wouldn't defile your program with the answer that I got." And honestly, I got really scared. I was out of my depth. I said, "Oh, no." And he explained in very fine detail what it is that I'd in fact said, the insult and everything else. And so I ran back to Milton the next day and I said, "Milton, you set me up. that is not the thing to do." And he said, "Well, hey, yesterday you did something with me that you wasn't supposed to do. And I put my hand up and I said, okay, son, you've won.
Right.
I said, but you couldn't win that one today, could you? I says, no. I says, it means you got to learn more. And so on and so on. And that's how I really got into knowing about the music business, because it's no different to any other business. It's got its rules, and it's got its protocols, and you observe them, or you be outside of the game. And honestly, with Mr. Kasner certainly, who was my only boss. I never had another record company boss after Mr. Kasner. And after leaving him, I told him from the very first day that I met him that I was going to be like him. I was going to have everything just like he has.
Right.
And he laughed. But many years later, I was very proud to be in, I think it was Sweden, and he was speaking to some white businessmen who were in the music business, and big names. And he said, in all my years in the music business, I've only ever met two gentlemen. One was the late great Nat King Cole. He says, and the other is this young man that is standing next to me.
Okay.
I was not very old then, you know. And I felt that was tribute to my mother and my father, and the way I'd been brought up. And doing business was no different to anything else. You must always observe the protocols and the rules.
Right.
And I've done that throughout my life and to the best of my ability. And I have benefited greatly because at the end of the day, Mr. Kasner was the one who had to sell me back all my copyrights and so on, which of course he's never done, or I don't think anybody has ever done with an artist of my stature.
Right, right. Well, we're very grateful to Milton, that's for sure.
Absolutely, he's passed,
yeah.
And obviously, I mean, if his family is looking at this program, that they should feel absolutely proud. He was an Antiguan, as opposed to most of the rest of us who were from the bigger countries, but yeah, he was special.
Right, right. Okay, so let's, just to wrap things up, so let's fast forward a little bit. You just released your album, Plaisance, in tribute to your hometown in Guyana, and we're seeing this whole new energy, right, around this whole push Caribbean music global, including what your contribution is. What do you think the Caribbean diaspora needs to do differently to make sure that we have as much eyes on us as possible in terms of our music and our culture?
You don't do anything in a big way. You have to, if you're going to make hundreds of this, you make one. That's my philosophy. You make one. And through that one becomes a template for everything else that you're going to make of that kind. In the Caribbean, we're trying too hard to be like other people. We haven't made one of ourselves yet. There are a number of social issues that need to be sorted out, because other than that, we carry our dirty linen abroad and nobody's interested. And we have to understand that the only history of our cultures, or cultures, the only one is the right one. It's the truth. If you can't tell the truth to your children, then you can't tell the truth to the world. Simple as that. And we have a certain proclivity, as they say, for doing that.
Right. So we have to be true to ourselves and know who we are.
We have to.
Yeah.
And then once we get to that position, we must, like I've said to you so many times before, it is the RingBang philosophy which speaks to us. and which says first we must learn to love ourselves. Everybody would like to think that they know that. But the truth of the matter is no point in knowing it if you don't live it. Then we must love the things that we make or create. Once we have done that, we must buy the things that we make or create. That's the hard one.
Right, yep.
If you don't buy the things that you make or create, you end up owing everybody everything, and then they come to take back that which is not yours. So therein lies the secret, because when you have done those three things significantly as a group of people, then you gain respect, you gain economic success, and you gain freedom, because it's a free state to be in. You become big and large, and you gain respect.
Indeed. Very, very profound words.
Thank you.
I think we could end on that note. It's very touching.
Happy to.
But Eddy, Dr. Grant, Mr. Grant, we really, really appreciate your contribution to our culture, to our music, to everything that you've done and continue to do. And we look forward to finding out more about Pleasance. Where could people find out more about your music?
I thought you would come to that eventually. Yes, very, very true. Right now, people are running all over the place looking for my music and can't find it. It's intentional. I don't want to be, and don't force me to be, on iTunes or Spotify or any of the other platforms. I've got a shop. It's called eddygrant.com. Everybody knows how to knock those into a phone. So you do that. If you really like me, and if you like what I do, what I say, who I am, then that's the place you go to find the music, all the music of Eddy Grant. And I'll say it again, it's eddygrant.com.
Right.
Okay?
And we'll put it on the screen so you
please.
See it. Yes.
I'll be happy.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you so much for everything.
It's my pleasure.